Chapter 27, Section 1, continued. We need to talk about getting the war in the Pacific turned around. Last time we talked about what was going on in the Pacific, we had just gotten bombed at Pearl Harbor. The thing is, Japan didn't just attack at Pearl Harbor. They bombed elsewhere as well. December 8th, 1941, Japanese planes are going to bomb Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And over the next number of weeks, Japan's going to attack numerous other places as well. February 27th, 1942, you have the Battle of Java Sea, where Japan's going to defeat a multinational fleet of warships. Japan can then start moving towards New Guinea in the bottom right. They're heading down towards Australia. Let's go back and talk about what happened in Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. So Japan is going to continue to attack in the Philippines. The Philippines were defended by about 30,000 U.S. troops and about 110,000 Filipino troops under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. When Japan bombs us in the Philippines, it's going to be a familiar sound. This happens basically within hours of Pearl Harbor, so the word hadn't gotten there. But Japan found our aircraft sitting out on the runways, and Japan destroys our warplanes. Remember, we had them out there to keep an eye on them, to guard them from sabotage. The attack didn't come in the way of sabotage, it came in the way of an enemy with planes. We needed those planes to protect our Pacific Fleet. With our Pacific Fleet now unprotected, our fleet has to withdraw out of the range of Japan. We can't have our ships getting sunk by Japan because we have no air support. The Japanese are going to start marching towards Manila, the capital of the Philippines, which is going to be fairly easy because there's no U.S. naval support there or air support. MacArthur realizes he stands no chance here, and he evacuates Manila, and he is going to retreat towards the Bataan Peninsula. The thing is, we were in such a hurry that we did not get a chance to stockpile enough supplies as we retreated. And so Japan's going to begin to put pressure on our struggling, starving troops. We're in a mess. We're outnumbered. We're outgunned. We're outsupplied. And we're inexperienced. Our soldiers had never fought like this. Whereas Japan had been at war with China and been taking over places already. We can't have our general captured by the Japanese. And FDR is going to order MacArthur to go to Australia. Not that MacArthur wanted to leave his troops, but he is under orders to leave. And MacArthur vows to his soldiers, I shall return. The remaining soldiers surrender in April of 1942. And this begins the Bataan Death March. 70,000 are going to be forced to march 65 miles through the jungle to a prison camp. Along the way, 10,000 are going to die. Some beaten, some shot, some starved. things are not going well for us in the start of this war. But by the spring of 42, remember, we were hit in December of 41. By the spring of 42, we had begun rebuilding our Pacific Fleet. Our Pacific Fleet was headed up by Admiral Chester Nimitz. And he's going to make a statement that we're lucky that our Pacific Fleet was in Pearl Harbor. I mean, they're going to hit us no matter where. We're lucky it was in Pearl Harbor. The harbor was shallow enough, some of the ships were salvageable. Whereas if our ships were out to sea, we would have had to start from scratch. Also, we're lucky our aircraft carriers weren't there. They weren't in port that day. Otherwise, that would have been an even bigger hit. By the spring of 42, we're ready to start putting some pressure back on the Japanese forces. Japan was moving down towards Hawaii, towards Australia. They're moving towards Australia, down through the Philippines, down towards Australia. That's their goal. The Japanese attack is going to be halted at the Battle of the Coral Sea. This is going to be a joint U.S. British naval force that surprises the Japanese here. And planes from our carriers is going to damage a Japanese carrier and destroy a Japanese carrier. Now remember, when you destroy a carrier, you're also destroying the aircraft that go with it and the pilots with the aircraft. The Allies do lose one carrier, but the Japanese advance on Australia is stopped. Which brings us to the Battle of Midway. The Japanese hope to hit Pearl Harbor again, but they know they can't do it how they had already done it. What they hope is they could take Midway. If they could take Midway, they could use that as a base to then launch an attack at Pearl Harbor. So June 3rd through 6th, 1942, you're going to have the Battle of Midway. If they can get it, they can hit us at Pearl Harbor again. This is mostly going to be an air battle. No ships fired their big guns at the Battle of Midway. We're very much outnumbered at Midway, but our intelligence service had broken the Japanese codes. We knew what their plans were, so we're ready. The Japanese are going to lose their 4 best aircraft carriers at Midway, along with the planes and the skilled pilots that go with it. We lose the Yorktown, but we regained naval superiority in the Pacific. So the Battle of Midway is the turning point of the war in the Pacific. That brings us to Guadalcanal. August 1942, down there in the Solomon Islands, the U.S. is going to launch its first major offensive. Now that we had it turned around at Midway, we can start pushing back. The Marines are going to come ashore, and they're going to stubbornly hold on to an airstrip, an airport on the island. The fighting is fierce, and the Japanese refuse to surrender. It was very dangerous. A Japanese soldier that was wounded was very dangerous. A lot of times they would be waiting with grenades. So they look dead or wounded, and as we come by, they blow themselves up. The Japanese are going to send a huge fleet to try to recapture Guadalcanal. A bloody battle ensues, but we hold on to the island. The war in the Pacific is finally in our favor. Let's talk the war in Europe and the Mediterranean, get that turned around. By Pearl Harbor, the Axis powers controlled a large chunk of Europe and the Mediterranean. So let's talk about what's going to happen in North Africa. The Italian forces had invaded North Africa, but they were suffering huge losses. I mean, just by 1941, the British troops had captured 100,000 Italian soldiers prisoner. Captured. You could just picture Hitler getting frustrated with, Mussolini, I gave you one job. Take North Africa, take the desert. And he can't get that right. So Hitler's going to have to send troops in. Hitler's going to send in his Africa Corps. His Africa Corps was commanded by Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, he was nicknamed. Rommel's going to make it as far as El Alamein in Egypt by July of 1942. Where he's headed was the Suez Canal. If they could take the Suez Canal, they control sea passage into the Mediterranean from the east. And they also want to take the oil fields in the Middle East to fuel that German war machine. The British are going to send in General Bernard Montgomery, old Monty, to stop Rommel. Rommel is starting to run short on men and equipment, and the British are going to be victorious at the Battle of El Alamein. Rommel and his troops are pushed out of Egypt. This is in July of 42. Britain has been in this war since 39. This is the first major British victory of the war.